and welcome back to my channel. I am so happy to finally be back with another tutorial, and we're going to be working with my favorite stitch of all time, the mesh stitch, and creating a cute cropped cardigan for summer, for fall. It's the perfect piece for layering with all of your outfits. The best thing about this pattern is that it is completely made to measure. You can make it any size. You can even adjust a lot of the design parts of this. You can make the sleeves longer, you can make the panels longer, so you can completely change up the design and look of this cardigan as well. So before following this tutorial, I would highly recommend that you open up the written pattern. I will leave a link to it in this video's description. Make sure you have it open for reference while you're following along with the tutorial, because it will make everything so much easier. Since this is a beginner-friendly tutorial, I will be showing you everything step by step and working alongside you, so don't worry. I also have an incredibly useful app to share with you that will make crocheting this project and many other projects much easier. As a crocheter or knitter, the row counter app is a must-have in your phone. With a wide range of tools, this app can make crocheting or knitting your projects much easier. You can set up multiple counters, you can easily tap to count your rows, and even add notes or stitch patterns. It's super intuitive, so there's going to be no more scribbling on sticky notes or guessing where you left off when you have this app. You can import patterns from so many different sources like Ravelry, Hobby, a PDF from your device, or a pattern from my blog. Once you start a new project and import the pattern, you can set up multiple counters and reminders to help you keep track of your rows. This is so incredibly useful when you're working on a project that has multiple repetitive rows like amigurumis, which are often worked in continuous rounds, or large pixel grid pieces where you have to keep track of every color change, and even projects like this one where we have a bunch of different rows made with a stitch that can be hard to count. I also love how easy the highlighter tool makes it to focus on a specific part of a pattern. If you're unfamiliar with a term or abbreviation in a pattern you're following, you can just head over to the handy glossary in the tools section of the app that will show you what it stands for. If a pattern that you're following says that you need 3 skeins of yarn and each of the skeins has to be 100 grams, but the yarn ball that you have only has the measurements in yards, you can use the yarn ball converter to find out how many skeins you'll need. There's a units converter, which is extremely helpful for measurements, and a wool weight converter, so you can find out what weight yarn you need to use. Also, there's a whole bunch of free amazing patterns on the app, and these are some that I think you guys should definitely try out next. So before you start crocheting along with me, I would highly recommend that you download the row counter app using the links in this video's description and open up the written pattern there. I'll also be showing you how I use the app to make crocheting my projects much easier and how you can use it to make crocheting this cardigan even easier. Also, some exciting news: Row Counter and I are hosting a giveaway where you can win a $100 gift card from Wool and the Gang, which is perfect because they've got some amazing yarns to choose from. You can enter by following the guidelines on this Instagram post. I've also linked it in this video's description so you can find it easily. Good luck everyone, and happy crocheting! Alright, so it's going to be tempting to skip this section because I'm basically going to explain the construction of this cardigan, but please don't, because trust me, it's going to make it so much easier to crochet this piece when you know how it's actually formed and crocheted. Let's say we have 4 parts. The very first part is going to be the back panel, and this back panel is basically just going to be a long rectangle made up of mesh stitches. So this long rectangle has to be wide enough to fit your shoulders. So to find this measurement, you're just going to measure the width of your shoulders. So from one corner of your shoulder to the other, and you're going to write that measurement down. And so when we make the mesh stitches, the total width of your back panel should be the same as the width of your shoulders. And then the length is entirely up to you. If you're making a cropped cardigan like me, then you can decide that the length of your back panel will be from the top of your shoulders till your waist. If you want a little bit shorter, it can be from the top of your shoulders till right under your chest. If you want it to be longer, top of your shoulders till maybe even your hips. The second part, we're going to be working directly from the back panel, and we're going to be making the shoulders. Now, our shoulders aren't completely straight. We have a little bit of a curve in them, right? So to account for this curve, we're going to have a little short section over here that goes over them. And so for this, let's say this is your back panel, we're going to be crocheting a few rows over it that are the same exact number of stitches, so it'll have the same exact width. Now this width is entirely up to you to decide, because you're going to have the shoulder section on both the sides. But remember to leave a long empty space in the middle, because remember the shape of the cardigan is going to come down like that. But let's go into the next step and then you'll understand a bit more about what I mean. After that, we're going to be having the front panel, and the front panel will be worked directly after the shoulder section. So we're going to be working the shoulders and the front panels together, one side first and then the other side. So let's say that you finish this, you're going to start by making the front panel. Let's say this is your shoulder section. The front panel is going to slowly increase, come into the middle,
increase, come into the middle, and then we're also going to have your front ties. This side will be worked separately, this side will be worked separately, and then we'll have the long ties that go like this on both the sides. So then you can tie them together to make a little bow at the end once you're done. After we're done with the back panel, shoulders, front panel, we're finally going to do a bit of sewing. So we're going to sew the front panel to the back panel, closing up the space over here and leaving this space open at the top to make the sleeves. So this will be sewn together and we'll have this space open, and then we're going to crochet rounds and rounds and rounds of mesh stitches to make pretty little sleeves. Again, the sleeves can be as long as you want or as short as you want. So that's basically the 4 different parts of this cardigan. Now before we start, I want you to decide what width you want for the cardigan, what length you want for the cardigan, how wide you want the shoulder section to be, and also how long you want the sleeves to be, and how wide you want the armhole to be for the sleeves. Now when it comes to working with mesh stitches, it is very important to make a gauge swatch first, and this is basically going to be a little square or rectangle made up of mesh stitches, so you can find out how many mesh stitches you will need to make sure that the width of your back panel is the measurement that you want. So I want my back panel to be around 14 inches wide. We're going to make a gauge swatch first, because unlike regular crochet pieces, for example, if you were to just make a line of single crochets, that would be fine, but mesh stitches usually become a little bit smaller than when you first start out, which is why it's important to do this, and I would highly recommend that you not skip this. Start with me, understand the pattern, and I promise it's going to be much easier. Go ahead and start by making a slip knot. Here's how I like to do mine. Make a little X shape, slide my hook under, and pull it through and tighten. Now I want you to go ahead and chain in multiples of 3, and it can be any number that's, for example, in the 3 times table. So for example, 6, 9, 18, 24. I've done a total of 30 chains. You can do more, but definitely don't do less, because we want it to still kind of be a little bit big. Otherwise the measurement's going to be off. After you've done your chains, I want you to chain 9 more. 1, 2, 3, 9. And then go ahead and single crochet into the 9th chain. So count from back down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Insert your hook into that 9th chain from your hook and single crochet. So pull up a loop and then yarn over and pull through both the loops on your hook. And this space over here is going to be your very first mesh stitch. Here's the pattern we're going to repeat all the way down. You are going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nice and loose chains. Then you're going to skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and single crochet into the 3rd chain. And there is your second mesh stitch. And now repeat chain 5, skip 2 chains. I know with the chains it can be a little bit hard to see, but this chain already has a single crochet in it, so it doesn't count. So 1, 2, and single crochet into the 3rd chain. That's why we worked in multiples of 3, because each mesh stitch is essentially made out of 3 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and single crochet into the 3rd chain. And go ahead and do this all the way down to complete your first row. Now I've reached the very end of my chain, so once again I'm gonna skip 2, 1, 2, single crochet into the 3rd and last one. And that is going to be your very first row of mesh stitches. Now I'm going to show you how to count the mesh stitches. Basically each space, each hole over here counts as 1 mesh stitch. So let's count them together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 11. So I've got 11 mesh stitches. Now here's how to start a new row, and these are the steps you're going to repeat every time you want to start a new row. Go ahead and chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then turn your work just like how we would for any other regular stitch. And now you're going to single crochet into this chain space. So we have the 5 chains, and the space in between them is the chain space. So you're going to insert your hook into the space and single crochet. And that's how you start a new row. Now you're going to repeat this pattern for the rest of the row. Chain 5, not 6. We only chain 6 at the beginning. And then single crochet into the next chain space. You always have to make sure that in every row you have the same number of mesh stitches. So make sure you don't accidentally skip one. Chain 5. And then single crochet into the next mesh stitch, and do this until the end of your row. Now I've reached the end of my row, so don't forget to also single crochet into your very last mesh stitch. And then I would recommend just doing a total count to make sure that you still have the same number that you started with. And then once again, you're ready to start a new row, so chain 6. Turn your work around and then single crochet into the first mesh stitch. Then go ahead and repeat the pattern of chaining 5, single crochet into the next mesh stitch, all the way until the end of the row. And now you've just learned how to crochet rows of mesh stitches. And this is the stitch that we're going to be using for our whole cardigan. So you've practically learned most of the steps by now. I want you to go ahead and crochet at least 5 to 8 rows. It's recommended 10. You can even do 10 if you want to, but I know that some of you might be in a rush. So 5 to 8 would be fine as well. Go ahead and crochet 5 to 8 rows of these mesh stitches, and I'm going to show you how to basically figure out the measurements that you need for your back panel. I also wanted to show you guys how to count the rows. This can be a little bit tricky. So always go to one edge of your piece and count like this: 1 row, 2nd row, 3rd row, 4th row, and 5th row. I'm going to stop here because I already know what measurements I want for my back panel, but I'm going to show you guys a quick demonstration. I would still recommend that you do at least 2 more rows, so don't just stop at 5. To get a really accurate measurement, the more the better. Alright, now go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and also a measuring tape, an inch tape if you have it, or if you have a ruler, I guess that's fine too. I'm going to be measuring in inches, but remember that you can always convert it to centimeter or whatever measurement you want. Everyone's measurements are going to be a little bit different, so let's see what the formula is going to be to calculate all this. First, I want you to remember measurement A, which was the width that you want for your back panel. Let's say that I want 15 inches. I want my back panel to be 15 inches wide. Now you're going to take that number and you're going to divide it by 4 and write down what number you get. I cannot do that in my head, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my calculator. Alright, so that gave me a decimal, 3.75. You might get a decimal, you might not. And now you're going to go ahead, put this aside for a bit, and grab your measuring tape. And we're going to see how many mesh stitches can fit in 4 inches. So place your measuring tape maybe in the middle and count how many mesh stitches fit inside. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you're going to go ahead and take this number, 3.75, or whatever number you got, and you're going to multiply it by 4. That gives me 18.75. Now, if you have a decimal like this, I would recommend that you round it up to the nearest number. So for me, that would be 19. So basically, to get the measurement that I want for my back panel, I need to do 19 mesh stitches. So that's how many total stitches you need to have in your first row and all the rows for the back panel, because remember, the back panel is just a long rectangle. So when you start off with 19 mesh stitches, all of the rows will also have 19 mesh stitches, and you can do as many rows as you want. Now that we know how many mesh stitches we need to find out how many chains we need to do to get this many. So you can go ahead and do 19 times 3, because remember, each mesh stitch is made out of 3 chains, and that gives me 57. So for my back panel, I'm gonna make a slip knot, and then I'm gonna chain 57. Then I'm going to go ahead and start my row and do 19 mesh stitches in the first row, and then keep doing rows with the steps that I showed you until my back panel is the length that I want it to be. And that's it. Now you're ready to start crocheting your back panel. So you can go ahead and rewatch the steps where I show you how to start a new row, how to end a new row, and just copy that exact thing, but with the number of chains that you just calculated and the number of mesh stitches that you need to reach the measurement that you want. Here's a look at my finished back panel. It has a total of 19 mesh stitches in every row, so I started off with 57 chains, and then I went ahead and I did 34 rows of mesh stitches. That's the total number of rows I have. Once you're done and your back panel is the length that you want it to be, whichever side your hook is facing, that's the side that you're going to start the shoulder section on. So you're just going to start a new row, turn your work, and then you're going to start the shoulder section. So I'm going to have 5 mesh stitches in my shoulder section. That means that I'm going to make 5 of these. So I already have my chain 6. A single crochet into the next mesh stitch. That's 1, chain 5, into the next mesh stitch. That's 2. Now I'm going to do my third one and 5. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to start the rows for the shoulder section. Now what I'm going to do for the next 8 rows, I want to make a total of 9 rows for the shoulder section. I'm just going to repeat these steps. So to start a new row, I'm going to chain 6. Then I'm going to turn my work. Then single crochet into the first mesh stitch. Then I'm going to chain 5 and repeat the same pattern as before into all of these 5 mesh stitches that I have over here in this row. I also forgot to tell you guys to place the stitch marker into the very first row that you did for the shoulder section. This will just help you remember where you started from. That's just about it. So next time you want to start a new row, repeat the same steps. You're going to chain 6, just like before what we were doing for the back panel. Turn it around, single crochet, and repeat the pattern of chain 5 and then single crochet into the next chain space. I feel like I'm going to be repeating that a lot this video, so I'm sorry if you guys have gotten sick of it. Alright, I'm going to see you after my 9 rows for the shoulder section are complete. I'm all done with my 9 rows for the shoulder section, and I'm ready to start the front panel. Another thing to keep in mind is that your last row for the shoulder section should be facing the inside of your cardigan. So it should be facing the side that will increase in the middle where you'll have your front ties. So if your hook or your last stitch is facing this side, just go ahead and do another row so that you can come into the middle side. Now we're going to go ahead and start the front panel, but there's a little bit of calculation that you need to do, so let's go over that first. Right now you have your shoulder section, and you need to increase the front panel to make this sort of triangular shape. To do this, we're going to be adding increases in the mesh stitches, just 1 additional stitch per a few rows, so we're going to make like a little pattern. Now what you need to do is count how many stitches you have in your back panel. 19 stitches in my back panel, so that means I'm going to divide 19 by 2, but I can't really do that since it's going to be like a number with decimals, so I'm going to round it up, and I'm just going to make it so that there's going to be 10 stitches on each side. Now the reason why I'm dividing this is because this is your back panel, and the front panels, there's going to be 2 of them. So there's going to be 1 front panel here, 1 front panel here. So this front panel will have 10 stitches, and this front panel will also have 10 stitches, and the back panel overall has 19. So in my shoulder section, I'm starting off with 5 stitches. That's how many stitches I have in the shoulder section over here. Now I need to make this number go from 5 to 10 in the last row. So let's say this is my 34th row. Again, the number of rows has to be the same as what you have in the back panel. I need to make the stitches go from 5 to 10 by the 34th row, so we're going to try and figure out a pattern. Now there's a bunch of different things that you could do. You could add an increase every 2 rows. So let's say you could do 5, then you could do an increase, so it would become 6. Then you can repeat the same number of stitches for a couple of rows. Then again, you can add 1, bring it up to 7, and then repeat. If I do it this way, I will reach 10 pretty quickly because we do have 34 rows to do. So here's the pattern that I'm going to do. I'm going to be working in blocks of 5. That means I'm going to have 1 increase row, then repeat, 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 repeat. 1 increase row, repeat, 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 repeat. So it's just going to repeat this pattern. So let's say it's going to go from 5 to 6, to 7, to 8, to 9 and 10. If this is all way too confusing and you don't feel like figuring out a pattern, that's completely fine. Just add an increase, do a couple of rows without increases, add another increase. Just make sure that you reach the number that you need by, let's say, maybe like a couple rows before. So I'm going to try to reach it by the 32nd row. And the last 2 rows are also going to be your front ties, the super long ones here. So you have to try and reach the number of stitches that you need at least 2 rows before. Just think of the pattern that you want to repeat. Do you want to do an increase every 2nd row? Do you want to do an increase every 3rd row? Do you want to do an increase every, like a really long time if you have a longer, cardigan? This will all make so much sense when you actually get started. Remember, don't get confused. All you need to do is add an increase every couple of rows, make it a pattern, repeat that pattern, and just remember to reach this number at least 2 rows before your last one. Oh, and this number is of course going to be different for you. So not this exact number, whatever the half of the total number of stitches in the back panel is for you. Now there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. What I'm going to do is basically set up secondary counters for each of the increase blocks that I'm going to do. So this will be when I have 6 stitches. This one will be when I have 7 stitches. This will be when I have 10. So this way I know that I'm working in these blocks, and then of course I have my global counter for the total number of rows. And that's what it's going to look like. I forgot to remind you guys to not link these secondary counters with the global counter so that they don't move together. So let's get started. We are doing the very first row for our front panel, and I'm going to show you how to basically do an increase. Every time you want to add an increase, you're going to be repeating these same steps. So let's start by starting the row like normal by chaining 6 and turn your work, single crochet into the very first mesh stitch to start this new row. And now we're going to add an increase. So you're going to chain 5, and then you're going to go ahead and single crochet into the same mesh stitch that you just single crocheted into before. So this is going to make 1 increase or 1 additional mesh stitch in your work. Now you can go ahead and repeat the pattern like normal. So you're going to chain 5, single crochet into the next mesh stitch, chain 5 again. So we're going to do no more increases, and you're just going to repeat the pattern, next mesh stitch, single crochet, until you reach the end of the row. And that is going to be my first row for the front panel. And I've put in my counter 1 row for the front panel and 1 row for my 6th block of increase. I'm going to go ahead and do my 2nd row for this block or for this pattern, and I'm not going to be doing any more increases. So remember, you have to do your increase in the first row, but then the next few rows should not have an increase, so it can basically become a gradual slope. If you add an increase in every single row, it's going to go more of like that instead of like a nice curve. So we're starting the next row like normal with 6 chains. I'm going to turn my work, single crochet into the first mesh stitch, and I'm going to go ahead and do the next few rows without any increases by repeating the same pattern. So row 2 till 5 will just be chain 5, and then I'm going to single crochet into the next mesh stitch, and then I will meet you back here for row 6. I have finished 6 rows. I changed up the pattern a little bit, so now my yarn is facing the inside of my work again, where we're going to have that slope. Right now we're going to be starting the next increase row, so now I'm going to be working in this 7th block over here. So let's go over how to do your increase row again. First, let's start the next row. So you're going to chain 6, and then you're going to turn your work and do your first single crochet into the first mesh stitch. Now we're going to do an increase. So you're going to chain 5, and then you're going to go ahead and single crochet into the same mesh stitch. And that is going to be your increase. Now my stitch count will go up from 6 to 7. Chain 5, single crochet into the next mesh stitch, and repeat this pattern. Now I'm done with my 7th row, and I did my first row for the 7th block. So I'm going to go for 6 rows in each of the blocks. Now I'm going to start my next row, and this one will have no increases. So I'm just going to repeat the pattern of chain 5 and single crochet into the next chain space until the very end, making sure that my stitch count stays 7 for the next 5 rows. Please don't forget to work into all of your stitches, because when you do an increase, it gets a little bit confusing and it's very easy to just miss the stitch that you did an increase in. So just go ahead and make sure that you're counting your stitches, making sure you have the stitch count that you were aiming for when you made the pattern for yourself. Once again, no increases in my row. I'm just repeating the pattern until it's time for the next increase. I'm almost done with this block. And there we go. So now I finished my 12th row and I finished my last row in the 7-stitch block. Now I'm going to be doing an increase so I can move on to the 8-stitch block. So once again, repeating the same steps where you chain 6. I'm going to show you guys one more time. Single crochet into the first mesh stitch, chain 5 again. Go ahead and single crochet into the same mesh stitch to do an increase. And then repeat the same pattern until the end of the row, but without any increases, of course. And that's just about it. We are going to be repeating the patterns that we made until we have the same number of rows as the back panel. So now that I did my first increase row, for the next 5 rows, I'm not going to be adding any increases. So 0 increases. I'm just going to be repeating the same pattern we've been doing for the longest time now. And once I'm done with all my rows, I'm going to show you guys how to do the front ties. And then we're going to move on to the next step. So go ahead, gradually add your increases. If you need to revise your pattern, change it up at any time. Remember that it doesn't need to be exactly the same. So if you need to add 1 extra row here or there or remove a row, that's completely fine. As long as you don't do increase after increase after increase, because that's just going to make a really steep slope. I'm going to show you guys quickly what the slope looks like so far. Also, another thing to keep in mind as you're doing this, always add the increases only on the inside side of your work. So as you can see, one of my edges is straight and the other one is going out like this. So this is where all my increases are, and this is where I don't do any increases. I wanted to give you guys an update of where I am. So I've reached my 27th row, and right now I'm working on the block where I have 10 stitches in each row, and I'm going to be completing my 4th row over here. So after this, I'm not going to be doing any more increases. I'm just going to keep repeating the rows, repeating the pattern with no increases until I reach my 32nd row. And then after I reach my 32nd row, I'm going to start doing the front ties. So even though I don't have an even number of rows in all of the blocks, I'm still just going to continue because, like I said, a few rows won't make that much of a difference. And that is the beauty of working with mesh stitches. You don't have to be so exact with it. But please remember to write down this pattern that you're using, and any extra rows that you do, write it down, or if you set up a counter like me, it's going to be really easy to see how many rows you did in each section of increases, because the other side has to be the exact same. So yeah, you can play around with rows here and there, but both the sides need to have the same pattern that you're following. So it's really important to write this down, to track it, so you don't get confused when it's time to do the other side. Bree suggested that I give you guys a closer look on what the slope should look like. So here it is. This is the shoulder section. That's a stitch marker that I put there. So shoulder section, oh yes. And then here is the slope. Oh yes, we are, oh okay. I think Bree has something very important she'd like to tell us. Oh my love, it's okay. Never mind. I've reached row 32 for my front panel, and I only have 2 more rows left before I'll have a total of 34 rows for the front panel, and then it would be the same as the back panel. So when you have around 2 rows left, or even just 1 row, this all depends on how thick you want the front ties to be. That's when we're going to start crocheting the front ties. So once again, you have to make sure that your hook is facing the inside of your cardigan, so not the straight edge, but the edge where you were doing your increases. So if you're not on the increase edge, you might have to do 1 more row to reach over here. Once you do, we're going to start chaining to make the front ties. Now, once again, your chains have to be in a multiple of 3, and I'm going to try and keep them nice and loose. I'm going to put up the measurements of exactly what I did, and if you want longer front ties, chain more. If you want shorter front ties, chain less. Just always make sure that it's in a multiple of 3. Once you've got the length of chains that you want, you're going to skip 9 chains. So you're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in the 9th chain, you're going to go ahead and insert your first single crochet into the chain. And now we're going to go ahead and start the mesh pattern again. So you're just going to repeat the same steps that we did before. So you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you're going to skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and single crochet into the 3rd chain. And go ahead and repeat this all the way down. So chain 5, skip 2 chains, and single crochet into the 3rd chain, all the way down till you come back to where we started over here. When you come back to where you've started, go ahead and single crochet into the very first chain that you made. So bringing your mesh stitches back to the front panel where it was connected. So you'll have this long chain of mesh stitches connected to your front panel. And now we're going to go ahead and continue this row. So this is going to be row 32 that I'm going to do all the way back. And you're just going to repeat your steps like you would normally. So I'm going to chain 5. And this time, instead of going into the chains, because we already finished that, I'm going to go into the chain spaces to do this row. And then again, I'm going to chain 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into the next chain space. So here's a better look at what that's going to look like. You're going to have your tie connected to the front panel, and now you're going to be making this row all the way to the very end, just repeating the pattern of chain 5, single crochet, chain 5, single crochet. Now I'm going to be doing my very last row that will bring my front panel to the same number of rows as my back panel. So for this row, I'm just going to go ahead and start it like normal with the chain 6. And then turn my work, and you guys know the drill from here. We're just going to go ahead and single crochet into the very first chain space. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat the chain 5 single crochet pattern all the way down. And this time when we reach the end, we're also going to be repeating the pattern through the long string that we made. So I'm going to show you what that will look like once I get there. But for now, go ahead and complete the row like normal. Okay, so now I've finished the part of the row that was connected to my front panel, and now I'm going to be continuing this row along the front strings. So to do that, you're just going to chain 5 and go ahead and insert your hook into the chain space and single crochet. So same pattern, it's just working on a different piece that's connected to your front panel. So again, go into the chain space and single crochet, and you're going to do this all the way until you reach the end of this string that you've made, making sure that you don't accidentally skip any and keeping your tension nice and loose all the way down this really long piece of string. Once you've reached the very end, it's time to fasten off your work, and to do this you can go ahead and just chain 2, grab your scissor and cut the yarn. Ignore the rusty thing I found, I lost my scissor, and pull and tighten. I've left kind of a long string because I'm going to be a little bit more cautious and actually weave in the ends with a needle to hide it later. So that's how you're going to finish up the little front strings. There are a bunch of optional other things that you can do, like you can go ahead and add like a shell border, or you can make it thicker by doing additional rows. You can make it thinner by just doing 1 row. It really is up to you and the design that you want. So the next step after doing your front ties, we are going to be sewing the sides together, but we'll be leaving a space open at the top for the armhole. So what I want you to do is go ahead and get a stitch marker and basically join the 2 sides together, or depending on how big you want the armhole to be. If you want it to be a tighter fit, make it a little bit more up, but definitely try it on and then just put the stitch marker wherever it's comfortable. Also, you have to make sure that you have the same number of stitches from the bottom till the stitch marker on both sides. So starting from the bottom till the stitch marker, I have 25 stitches. And then on the other side, the back panel, I also have 25 stitches starting from down all the way up. And then the stitch marker is on the 26th stitch. So that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you how to stitch it together. Remember, we're not going to be stitching this together. We're only going to sew from the bottom till the stitch marker. Go ahead and tie a double knot to secure the yarn onto the needle, and now we're ready to start sewing. Remember, we're going to be starting from the bottom of our piece, and we're going to try and line up the stitches to each other so it's nice and neat. So go ahead and grab the very last stitch, and I'm going to go through it and just pull a lot of yarn out. And now I'm just going to tie a knot to secure this in place. I'm going to tighten the knot, and now we're ready to start sewing. I think I want to do a double knot, so we just want to make sure that this doesn't come undone. Also, because we're working in the mesh stitch, try to bring it a little bit down so that it doesn't get all tangled up. The first way is to just sew very loosely through the mesh stitches, but a better way to do it would be to also sew some of the chains together. So this is my very first mesh stitch that I'm sewing together. So I'm gonna go through the chain here, both of the chains, and just very loosely pull. If you pull it too tight, then it's all gonna get bunched up. So remember to keep your tension nice and loose. After the chain, I'm gonna go into this little single crochet here, like that. So the second mesh stitch's little border. And once again, pull very loosely. And now I'm gonna go into the next mesh stitch, but once again, through the chains, making sure that I'm grabbing the loops of the chain rather than just simply going through them. And next mesh stitch, I'm gonna go through the little border, and I'm just gonna repeat this pattern all the way, always making sure that I'm pulling this loose. Once again, I've reached my next mesh stitch. I'm gonna go through the chain, grabbing the loops, making sure that I'm going through the corresponding mesh stitches on both sides. So if I'm sewing this mesh stitch, always making sure that I'm not grabbing one from the other side and that they're all, laying flat against each other. And now just repeat this pattern until you reach your stitch marker. And remember, there's so many different ways to sew this. Whichever way feels comfortable, most natural for you, go ahead and follow that. The main point is to just join these sides together. Once you reach your stitch marker, we're going to do our last few sewing bits, and then we're going to fasten it off. So just go ahead and remove your stitch marker and then sew through the part where your stitch marker was. And I'm just going to do this little bit of border as well. And then as you're pulling through your last piece that you're sewing together, leave a little bit of a loop, go through that loop, and pull to tighten into a knot. And then to make it extra secure, you can go through it one more time. Once again, once you have a little loop, go through that loop and tighten into a knot to secure. Now after that, with the rest of the yarn, you can weave it in. Just make sure that this is not loose. And if it is, you can do a few more extra stitches, extra knots to make it even more secure. And here's how to weave it in. So just go through any little loops that you find and pull the yarn through, again very loosely, making sure that you don't go through too many at a time, otherwise it might bunch up. Just being careful to grab the loops and go through them. I'm not doing a very good job right now, but it's pretty random. You're just gonna weave them through. And that's basically going to hide the yarn in between your stitches so that it doesn't show. And then once you've weaved a lot of it in, you can cut the extra off. And there you go, that's how you are going to sew the sides together. And now we have this armhole open at the top, and now I'm going to show you how to crochet around it so that you can do the sleeves. Insert your hook, okay, that's not my hook, that's a pencil. Insert your hook through any one of the bottom stitches that are close to where you just sewed. So this is the top and this is the bottom. So insert your hook anywhere near the bottom through one of the mesh stitches, of course. And then go ahead and grab your yarn, and we're first going to attach the yarn with a double knot into this mesh stitch. And I'm going to leave a bit of a longer string so I can weave that in to make it a little bit neater later. So that's my first knot. I'm going to go ahead and do my second knot. Alright, so now that your yarn's attached, remember our pattern that we've been repeating this entire time, chain 5 and then single crochet into the chain space. We are going to do that. So insert your hook, pull up a loop like this and chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember to keep your chains loose as always. And then find your next mesh stitch. So not this one down here because it's connected to your seam. It's actually going to be this one over here. So go into it and single crochet. Now here's my biggest tip for doing the sleeves. Because we're not going to be doing rows, we're going to be doing rounds. It's always good to get your stitch marker and mark the very first chain that you made, because this will help you know when you've come all the way back around and when to start a new round. Now just go ahead and go all around the armhole by repeating the pattern. Chain 5 and find your next mesh stitch, this one over here, and single crochet into it all the way around until you come back to where your stitch marker is. chain 5, find your next mesh stitch, and go into it. Single crochet. Once you come back to where your stitch marker is, we're not going to be single crocheting into the chain space. We're actually going to be single crocheting into the marked chain that you did with your stitch marker. So the very first chain over here, you're going to go into it, and you're going to slip stitch, not single crochet, slip stitch like that. And now we're going to turn our work around like this, so just switch the direction, and you're going to go ahead and slip stitch into the chain space. So go into it, pull up a loop, and then slide that same loop through the other one on your hook, and now we're ready to start our next round. So once again, go ahead and chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Always remember to get your stitch marker and mark the very first chain that you made, because that's how we're going to be starting and ending every round. And then go ahead and single crochet into the next chain space. Once again, repeat the same pattern all the way around, chain 5, find your next chain space, single crochet into it, all the way around until you come back to where your stitch marker is. The important thing is to always make sure that you have the same number of mesh stitches in every round, because we don't want any increases or decreases since the armhole is going to be pretty loose anyway. I wanted to go over the steps one more time. So when you come all the way around and you reach your stitch marker, remember not to go into the mesh stitch. We're going to go into the chain 1. I know this can be a little bit confusing, but the good thing about it is that you can always just count your mesh stitches, and if you have the same number as the round before, then you're on the right track. If you don't, then you probably either missed one or you need to do one more, so then you can go into the mesh stitch and, you know, make another stitch like how we did the increases for the front panel. So go ahead and remove your stitch marker and insert your hook into that first chain, slip stitch, and these are the steps you're going to repeat every time you want to start a new row. So now we've ended that round, and we're going to turn our work, and now we're going to slip stitch into the chain space. So go into the chain space, not into the chains, but the space, pull up a loop and slip stitch once again. Now you're ready to start your next round. So chain 5, grab your stitch marker and mark the first chain so that you know when you're ready to end the next round. And go ahead and single crochet into the next chain space. Repeat the pattern of chain 5 and single crochet into the next chain space all the way around, and then repeat the same steps to start and end every round. You can go ahead and do as many rounds as you want, so you can make the sleeves long, you can make them short. Today I'm going to be making a short sleeved cardigan. I've done a long one before, so if you do want to make a long sleeved one, you can see how many rounds I did for that. Another thing I would recommend that you do is set up another part by pressing the plus sign on the row counter app, because counting the rounds for the sleeves is going to be extremely tricky. So it's good if you have a counter, because you really can't tell the difference about where's your front panel, back panel, and where the sleeves start. So to just stay on top of them, I'm going to set up another counter for this. And this is going to make our lives so much easier. And here we go. So I've done 2 rounds, and right now I'm doing my 3rd round, and when I finish it I'm just gonna press the plus, and this way I'll be able to track all my rounds.
When the sleeves are as long as you want them to be, there's one more additional round you can do, and for this, these are the steps you can repeat. It's basically going to add a little bit of a border around your work. So this is what it looks like without the last round of border, and this is what it's going to look like with the border. So basically, to make this border, you're just going to insert 5 single crochets into the chain space. So go into the space, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, trying to make these nice and loose, not too tight. And then you're going to go ahead and slip stitch into the little single crochet from the previous round. So you have your chain space here, your single crochet stitch, and then another chain space. So you're going to go into the single crochet stitch and slip stitch and repeat into the next chain space. So once again, 5 single crochets, 1, 2, and 5. And then because you're going to be doing this all around, you can go ahead and slip stitch into the single crochet stitch, single crochet 5, slip stitch, single crochet 5, slip stitch, all the way around. And once you're done with that round, here's how to end your work. You're basically just going to slip stitch into where your stitch marker was, and then you can chain 1 or 2. Go ahead and grab your scissors, cut the yarn, pull and tighten to fasten off, and then you can weave this in to hide it, and you are done with the sleeves. Here's how to attach the yarn onto the other side after you've finished, one side of the cardigan, and now you need to start the other. So to do this, just go ahead and grab your yarn, insert your hook into the very corner mesh stitch, pull the yarn through it, and then go ahead and tie a double knot to secure this in place. 1 and 2. Trying to make sure that it's at the corner of the mesh stitch like that. And now you can go ahead and get started with the shoulder section. So to start, insert your hook into the mesh stitch, pull up a loop, and chain 6. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're ready to start our first row for the shoulder section.
And here is the finished piece. Now you can use the front ties and try a lot of different designs. You can wrap it around yourself, or you can just tie a regular bow. So to do that, go ahead and make a regular knot and then tighten it. You can tighten it more to cinch it at the waist a little bit or make it a little bit looser. Then go ahead and make a little loop, wrap the other piece around the loop, and pull it out to make your bow. And there you go, you're all done. I hope you all love your cardigan, and I will see you in the next tutorial.